What if the reason you got here has nothing to do with an algorithm, but with a moment that was already written for you? Nothing happens by chance. Very few are ready today. Now do something simple. Relax your shoulders. Breathe slowly. Imagine for a moment a door in front of you, a door that emits a warm light from the other side. Because in a few minutes you will understand something that most people go through their entire lives without recognizing, and the final piece of this message will only appear at the end of this meeting. There are moments in life that seem ordinary. A video pops up, a phrase you hear, a thought that arrives unannounced. But if you look closely, some of those moments have a strange sense of destiny. If something invisible were silently arranging pieces, not with noise, not with spectacle, but with precision. And the curious thing is that often only a few people notice it. That's why there's something that some call a 1% code. It's not a literal number. It's not a closed group. It's not a human elite. It's simply a way of describing people who recognize certain signs when they appear. People who, after long periods of silence, begin to notice that something is changing. Perhaps you have felt it. That deep weariness of waiting for answers. That feeling of walking for a long time without seeing clear results. Those moments when it seems that everything has stopped. You have waited longer than others imagine. And this is where many people misinterpret their own life story. They believe that silence means abandonment. They believe that a pause means loss. They believe that delay means failure. But there is another completely different interpretation. A reading that changes everything. What seemed like silence was actually movement out of your sight. Think about this. For a moment, when a seed is underground, no one sees what happens. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. But in reality, everything is happening. The roots grow first. Always first. Because the invisible prepares the visible. And this logic appears again and again in life's deepest stories. Before an open door, there is a period of preparation. Before a new stage, there is a silent stage. Before any visible change, there is invisible work. That's why many people quit too soon. They leave just before the door opens. But those who remain vigilant, those who keep walking even when they don't see clear signs, they begin to notice something. Small confirmations, moments that seem synchronized, messages that arrive just when you need them. It's not magic, it is awakened consciousness. It's the ability to recognize when the moment begins to align. And here, a truth emerges that is rarely spoken aloud. The most important doors don't open with noise, that they open silently. First, the perception changes. Then, the direction changes. And finally, the scenario changes. That's why, when someone is entering a new stage, something curious often happens. It begins to feel different. Not necessarily easier, but it is clearer. The confusion begins to dissipate. The decisions are starting to make sense. The path no longer seems like a labyrinth. And even though you can't see the whole map yet, you can feel that something is moving. That's what some call high command provision. It's not about superficial abundance. It's about alignment. Right doors, right people, right times. It doesn't happen due to pressure. It doesn't happen out of desperation. It happens when the internal process is ready. That's why not everyone recognizes it when it happens. Some are too distracted, others were too rushed, and others simply don't believe that. Something bigger could be arranging details in their favor. But there is a small group of people who do perceive it. People who have gone through periods of deep learning. People who have had to develop patience. People who have had to rebuild themselves from within. That process is not comfortable, but it is powerful because it transforms the way a person walks through life. He no longer walks around seeking external validation. Walk with purpose. And when that happens, something changes. The doors that were previously closed begin to move. Opportunities that once seemed invisible are beginning to appear. Not like a sudden spectacle, but rather as a path that is revealed step by step. And this is where the metaphor of the door reappears. Imagine that door again. The one you envisioned at the beginning. The warm light is coming from the other side. For a long time, you may have thought that door was closed. But there's something you need to know. Sometimes the door is already open. You simply hadn't looked up to notice it yet. And in the next part of this message, we're going to explore something even deeper. How to recognize the 3 silent signs that indicate a door has already begun to open in your life. There's a reason why many people walk past an open door and still keep walking as if it were closed, Todd. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's not a lack of ability. It's something much quieter. It's perception. When someone has lived too long in periods of waiting, their mind learns to expect silence. It learns to expect obstacles. It learns to expect more delay. That's why, even when the scenario begins to change, some don't recognize it immediately. But those who develop a deeper perspective begin to notice 3 silent signs that almost always appear when a door begins to open. The first sign is unexpected clarity. For a long time, you may have lived with questions. Which path to take, which decision to make, where to invest your energy. Everything seemed confusing. But suddenly, without much noise, something changes inside you. An idea becomes clear. A direction begins to feel right. A step stops seeming risky and starts to seem natural. It's not a loud voice. It's a quiet conviction. And that clarity doesn't come from pressure. It comes from preparation. Because when a person has gone through enough seasons of learning, their inner self becomes more sensitive to the right direction. The second sign is the reorganization of your environment. This happens in curious ways. Some people leave. Others appear conversations that didn't happen before begin to occur. Ideas that weren't available before begin to emerge. It's not chaos. It's a reorganization. Often, when a door opens, a small adjustment to the stage takes place first, like when a room is being prepared for something new. Furniture that moves, spaces that are freed up. It may seem awkward at first, but then you understand something important. That movement was creating space. The third sign is even deeper. It is the peace that appears before the evidence. This is one of the rarest and most powerful signs, because the world usually teaches the opposite. The world says, first the test, then the peace of mind. But in spiritual processes, something different happens. First comes a feeling of inner calm, then comes external confirmation. It's as if your inner self receives an advanced signal, kind of silent whisper that says, keep walking. And those who learn to recognize that sign begin to walk with a different kind of confidence. Not an arrogant certainty, but a quiet confidence. Now, I want you to go back to that image for a moment. The door, the warm light, breathe again, relax your shoulders once more. Imagine you are slowly approaching that door. You touch it, and you discover something that changes the whole scene. The door wasn't closed, that you was just waiting for someone to gently push her. Often, the doors of destiny do not require strength. They require awareness. They require presence. They need to recognize the right moment. And this is the point. Where money. People discover something that completely transforms the way they walk through life. They weren't waiting for a sign. They were being prepared to recognize her. That's why the quiet periods were not a waste. That's why the breaks weren't losses. That's why the long roads weren't mistakes. Each experience was sharpening your perception. It was strengthening your inner self. He was building the character necessary to walk through a bigger door. Because true provision never reaches a distracted mind. It reaches a prepared mind. And that preparation is not always visible, but it always leaves traces. Perhaps now you understand something that seemed confusing before. Those moments when it seemed that everything was stopped were actually building something inside you. That patience, that discernment, that endurance, that wisdom. All those qualities are part of the 1% code, not because those people are superior, but because they chose to keep walking when others decided to stop. And that kind of perseverance changes the way a person encounters their own destiny. Now, before we continue, I want to invite you to do something very simple. If these words resonated with you, if you felt that this message arrived at the right moment, write a short sentence in the comments that, not for me, but rather as a personal seal of conscience. Simply write, the door is open. That phrase is more powerful than it seems, because when a person consciously declares that they are ready to move forward, something inside them changes. The mind aligns, attention is focused, and the opportunities begin to become visible in a different way. Thousands of people can see the same scene, but only those who are attentive recognize the door. And here's something that almost no one says out loud, that the most important doors in life don't appear suddenly. Actually, they have been in front of you for longer than you imagine. The difference is that now you can see them. In the last part of this message, we will explore the final step of this process. Not how to force a door, but how to walk through it with wisdom. When you finally recognize that it is open, because that's where the real transformation happens, there is a silent moment that very few people recognize. It is not the moment when a door appears, not even the moment it opens. It is the moment when a person decides to cross it. That moment makes no noise. There is no applause. There are no celebrating crowds. There are no spectacular signs in the sky. There is only one internal decision, a calm but firm decision. Because when someone reaches that point, something within their story has already changed. For a long time, the path was full of questions. Moments when it seemed that nothing was progressing. Days when the silence was louder than the answers. But each of those stages was fulfilling a function that can only be understood over time. What appeared to be stillness was the work of God. When that understanding finally takes root in a person's heart, something powerful happens. Anxiety decreases. The urgency disappears, and in its place appears something much more. Solid address. People who go through this transition begin to walk in a different way. They no longer react to every obstacle. They no longer interpret every delay as a defeat. They no longer confuse silence with absence, because they understood something that completely transforms their perception. Life doesn't always move in a straight line. Sometimes it moves in circles that are preparing something bigger. Think again about the image we have used throughout this meeting, the door dot. But this time, imagine something different. Imagine you walk through that door, but not running, not pushing, but by walking calmly. Take one more breath. Relax your shoulders again. Imagine you walk through that door and enter a scene illuminated by a warm light. A wide road lies before you, a path you hadn't seen before. Not because it didn't exist, but because it wasn't the right time to see it. Yet that many people believe that destiny works like a sudden surprise. But those who have walked far enough discover something different. Destiny is more like a path that is revealed step by step. Each door leads to another stage dot. Each stage opens a new understanding. Each understanding broadens the vision. That's why people who learn to recognize these transitions don't live looking for shortcuts. They live developing discernment. Discernment to know when to wait. Discernment to know when to move forward. Discernment to recognize when a door is no longer closed. And here a truth emerges that often goes unnoticed. People who experience true provision are not always the fastest thought. They are often the most attentive. People who learn to observe. People who learn to listen. People who learn to walk patiently even when the road seems long. That way of walking completely transforms the relationship with the future. Because when someone lives with that awareness, they stop feeling that everything depends on their strength. To begin to understand that there is also a greater guide. A guide that organizes meetings, that aligns moments, that opens doors at the right moment. And when that mature trust appears, the heart stops living in constant tension. Something much deeper emerges. That peace, not a passive peace, but a peace that walks, a peace that makes decisions, a peace that advances when the time comes. Perhaps that's why you came here today. Perhaps these words did not appear before you by accident. Perhaps they simply arrived at the moment when your perception was ready to recognize them. Because when a person is ready for a new stage, something curious happens. You begin to notice signs that previously seemed invisible. He begins to understand processes that previously seemed confusing, that begin to walk with an inner confidence that does not depend on external circumstances. That kind of transformation is silent but profound. And often it begins with a simple act of awareness, an inner statement, a moment where the person recognizes what is happening in their life. That's why I want to invite you to do something now. Something simple, something brief, but significant. Repeat this phrase in a loud voice or to yourself. What was meant for me is now arriving. It's not a made formula. It is an act of alignment. It is a decision to open your perception to what is already beginning to move in your life. Because when the mind, heart, and intention align, the way a person walks changes completely. He no longer walks with constant doubts. Walk carefully, and that attention reveals paths that previously seemed non-existent. Before ending this meeting, I would like to close with a brief prayer. If you wish, you can close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath and let these words accompany your silence. Father, thank you for the paths you prepare, even when we don't see them. Thank you for the doors you'll place in front of us at the right time. Give us wisdom to recognize them. Give us calm so as not to rush the processes. Give us discernment to walk with confidence when the time comes to move forward. Let every step be guided by clarity. May every decision be filled with peace, and may each stage reveal the purpose you have planted within us. Thought amen. If you've made it this far in the message, there's something important I want to tell you. This space does not exist by chance. It is a place where thousands of people are learning to walk with more clarity, more peace, and more purpose. If this encounter helped you see something from a different perspective, write this phrase in the comments: I walk with clarity. That statement can become a powerful reminder for your own process. And if you'd like to continue exploring messages like this, you can subscribe to the channel. Here we will continue to have these meetings where reflection, faith, and conscience come together to open new perspectives. See you in the next message, because some doors open and others simply wait for someone to be ready to walk through them.